Hi everyone, welcome back to the weekly politics show with myself, Councillor Puru, and co-host Councillor Andrew Wood. So in this section, we're going to discuss the main issues around the London Assembly and Mayoral election. So on the 6th of May, we've all received the ballot. A lot of us are going to go out and vote. A lot of us are probably going to be encouraging you to vote as well. But what are the main issues in the capital, in London? So a lot of the issues we face in Tower Hamlets are also faced in other boroughs, and they seem to be a London-wide issue. So Andrew and I are going to just go through the main issues, which is crime, housing, and transport. And hopefully that will allow us next week when we have Murad and hopefully a Conservative candidate, we could pose some of the questions and see what the answers are. So, Andrew, do you want to kick off on the issue around crime? I know knife crime has been a massive topic in London. We're kind of fortunate. I've had fatal stabbings in my ward, but if you compare it to other boroughs, they're having like five or three. It's more or less become an epidemic in terms of knife crime and gang related crime and all the associated issues like people on mopeds, grabbing people's phones and all that kind of stuff. Andrew, what are the, in terms of policing and crime, what are the main issues that both political parties need to cover in terms of what's happening in London?
Yeah, so first of all, as a reminder, so the Mayor of London has something called MOPAC, which is the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime, and they're basically responsible for the Met Police in terms of the direction and the finances of it. MOPAC also has its own budget, so I know they do other things as well, and obviously they have some other powers. The difficulty the Mayor has is that some of that responsibility is shared also with the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, so sometimes who's directly responsible, is it the Mayor or Priti Patel, is slightly unclear, but certainly it would be true that the Mayor and his Deputy Mayor, currently Sophie Linden, set the tone in terms of the day-to-day, not the day-to-day management of the police, but kind of what their direction, what they should be working towards. Yeah. And clearly, crime is a major issue in London. I'm also aware that other boroughs have got it particularly bad, and even within Tower Hamlets, some areas have got it worse than others. There's been a lot of talk about what's called the Glasgow model, which is basically you treat serious crime like this as actually a health issue, and you kind of approach it in a completely different way. So rather than the kind of just the policing only, will arrest you and throw you in jail approach, you try and look at the causes of crime and you try and divert people away from crime. And that's kind of been an interesting debate that's kind of been going on in the past over the years. And obviously it's not just about policing, because obviously there are other parts of the criminal justice system that the Mayor doesn't control. So there's no point arresting people if the courts are busy and then don't jail people. But at the end of the day, the Mayor still has, probably more responsibility for crime and crime management than any other person, with the exception of perhaps Priti Patel. And I think, this has been a weakness of the Mayor, is that, crime has gone up. But I'm as a councillor, I'm not entirely sure what MOPAC and the Mayor are doing about it. I know they've had issues with finances. One of the good pieces of news is I talking to the police recently, is they were saying is actually police numbers in Tower Hamlets are going up again, because there was a period when they were going down, and they have gone up, and therefore the police have kind of got more resources now than perhaps they had a couple of years ago, but perhaps still not in proportion to the increase in the population. So.
Yeah, I know the Metropolitan Police has gone on a recruitment drive. I know some retired police officers have been asked to come back in other capacities. Mm-hmm. So it does seem like there's more resources or more emphasis. It seems to be moving away from, say, frontline to more intelligence-based. They're sort of like training people to directly become detectives, mm-hmm. Rather than go through the police constabulary route into that. But it is a discussion that does dominate conversations on the doorstep and on the radio waves as well. The other big massive issue is housing. I know there's some interesting stuff coming out of the GLA, And Andrew, have you spotted these sort of like the small sites that the Mayor of London is giving out? And it's kind of interesting that they're allowing like small community groups to build, either self-build or small type of social housing. There's one site around the corner from where I live, in Christian Street, that's up, but they seem to be dotted all over. What's your take on that? So like having a mix of housing providers, is that the right way forward, or what's your take?
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I think one of the problems I think we have in England is that we have too few people building homes, and they tend to be the big private sector developers, plus some of the housing associations. And I know when we were building more homes in the 50s and 60s, that was also because we had lots of smaller companies involved, kind of building homes, maybe not so much in London, but certainly outside of London. And because the planning system is so difficult and complicated and bureaucratic, is a lot of them, especially during the last financial crisis, kind of lost their way. So I think anything that brings in new people into the market who can build or develop homes, I think can only be but a good thing. The reason why I was smiling when you said small sites, I thought you were talking about something in the London plan. There was a dispute between the Mayor of London and the outer London boroughs, because in the London plan, which has now been adopted in March, so it's a month old now, he was basically trying to get more homes built in the outer London boroughs through small sites and having higher housing targets on these small sites. And the outer London boroughs not being very happy with that. And there was a bit of a political bun fight between them and the mayor on that, because this has always been the difficulty is, we have to build X number of houses in London, and not all local authorities are as keen as Tower Hamlets to build those homes. And therefore, that's been one of the problems. And in the end, he had to withdraw that because the examiners didn't agree with him. But it also then meant is that his London plan, in theory, but this is pre-COVID, wasn't going to deliver enough homes to actually meet London's housing needs. Whether that will change because of COVID, we don't know. But, the other power that he's got, Transport for London own a lot of land. So one of the things that's happening in East London, so in Newham and eventually in Tower Hamlets, may well be that the mayor himself is using Transport for London land to actually build his own home, so to speak. And that could be very interesting if that really gets going. And so far it hasn't really happened yet, but that could be a big change if it does happen.
Yeah, that's been a discussion, I think, both political parties. I remember when the elections happened 5 years ago, both Zach Goldsmith and Mayor Sadiq Khan said that they want to release that TFL land. And it's kind of like going back to the tradition. A lot of people don't realize, but the largest house builder in London was the London City Council, the LCC. They built the most number of houses, more than the local authorities. So a good example is, I think, the Boundary Estate is an LCC, and it's actually the first social housing estate purpose built in the UK. But that set the tone, and they look similar as well. They got that red brick kind of look to them, and it's sort of like trying to get back to that tradition. So housing is a massive issue. And then what's your take on rent controls, Andrew? Is rent controls a way forward? This is probably the bit when Andrew and I disagree on something.
I actually, so when I read that, I actually tweeted 3 documents. So The Economist did some examination of the rent controls in Berlin and basically found that it reduced housing supply. So the evidence from other areas is not as supportive of the policy as proponents might think. So it'd be an interesting debate, that one. My personal view is that they're okay in the very short term, but in the long term, they have unintended consequences. And the evidence would suggest, and I did tweet, I have to find my tweet again. I wasn't expecting to get an answer on this. I think there was an article in New York Times as well, maybe, is that when you actually look at where this has been done in other places, it has caused issues. And I think the only solution to this problem is we have to build more homes. And in my personal view, that includes on the Greenbelt, but unfortunately, pretty much all of the major politicians and political parties, including the mayor, the current mayor Sadiq Khan are not willing to build on the green belt. But unless you do that, I don't see how we can ever build affordable housing in London. And in Germany, where where my mum comes from, it's very common that you have houses. I mean, you still have lovely parks and lovely green areas. So it's not like completely, built over concrete jungles. So you can have, really nice homes in green areas, and not have a green belt. So that's my view on that one. So.
No, it is an interesting debate, and I think it's gonna. We don't know what the impact of COVID is. There's more residentials going up in the city of London as well, and that's going to be interesting. They've had interesting debates in that council chamber in the city of London, and so it's going to be an interesting kind of debate and something to watch out for as well. We're nearly at the end of the program. Hopefully next week we're going to have Murad and hopefully a Conservative candidate up, and we could, contact Andrew and me for questions that you want to pose to them. I know one of the questions that is going to be posed is the issues around low traffic neighborhoods and the impact it has on families that rely on the car as a means of income. But if there's any other questions you've got, we're happy to pose it to both candidates and get their perspective on things. And let's see how it goes. But we're near the end of the program. Andrew, is there any final things you want to say to the listeners in terms of London or what's coming up next, what to look out for next week?
Well, I guess probably the main thing to kind of say is that the polling cards have all been sent out. Mm-hmm. I've had 3 because on the Isle of Dogs we've got 3 of them. So if you haven't had your polling card, it means you're probably not registered to vote, and you've got until the 19th of April to register to vote. So that's probably the key message. And also the census. If you haven't done your census, please do your census forms as well.
So polling cards, if you haven't got it, you need to apply for it, and guys, get those census forms in. But thank you again for watching the weekly politics show with myself, Councillor Puru, and co-host Councillor Andrew Wood. Enjoy the weekend, and we look forward to seeing you next Friday, hopefully with Murad and a Conservative candidate, and you never know, they might have some sparks flying. But thank you again for watching the show, and enjoy the weekend. Thank you very much.